Whew. Is it me? Or is it hot in here? Maybe it's summer. Maybe it's the insane open qualifiers we just had. Or maybe it's both. I'm RandomMinionCaster, and welcome to Random's Rundown, where we'll be recapping the Proving Ground circuit. So the Proving Ground circuit qualifiers, summer number 1 open qualifiers, my goodness, that's a mouthful, just wrapped up. Uncounted teams applied, 32 teams went in, only 16 teams came out. 8 organizations returned from spring, and only 1 kept their roster intact. Today, we focus on the 16 that made it through the open qualifiers and what their runs through it looked like. Starting with Group A, which some are already dubbing the Group of Death. Team in the Group of Death, Group A here, are the fan favorites, 100 Thieves Next. And through their open qualifier run, they did not drop a single game. For the 3rd straight open qualifiers, they went 5-0. And with the Swiss format, their matches only get progressively harder. So they face teams such as AoE and EGP. And to even start it off, they had to face against DK Crew. They did have some few roster changes, most notably Darkwings returning back to Amateur in the mid lane role here. But that hasn't made them any weaker, and they are still the team to beat. The second team in the Group of Death is Maryville University, the collegiate darlings coming back from spring. Also, the only team to beat 100 Thieves Next in a full series here in the PG circuit qualifiers. They continue to maintain their strong early game with very fast-paced focus on the bot lane, but it is worth noting that Maryville did not have a perfect run. They dropped 2 games in the open qualifiers, notably to EG Prodigies and to Taco Gaming here, so still space to work on, still a developing team. Their team in Group A, Cincinnati Fury. Now, this is an organization which might not be familiar to followers of the Proving Ground circuit. However, when you look at the names on the roster, you'll recognize them as a mix of players from no team. The PGCQ Spring number 2 winners, Taco Gaming, the runners-up from that same tournament, and EG Prodigies as well. So definitely not a roster to be trifled with. However, their open qualifiers, again, marred a little bit here. They beat the lower seeded teams like Team Ambition Blaze, York University, and Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warriors. They had notable losses to Team Pending and to Team Taco Gaming. So Cincinnati Fury, they're strong. They've got carries in every lane, but they still have some synergy and teamwork issues to work on. The 4th and final team here in Group A, the Group of Death, and probably the reason why it was named so, DK Crew, the most criminally underrated team here in the PGCQ Summer number 1 Open Qualifiers. They were seeded as 32nd seed, but when you look at this roster here, 4 players from Harrisburg and Evan RL, formerly of Maryville. These guys have a ton of competitive experience, and it showed in their wins. They had the hardest open qualifier gauntlet, facing up against 5 teams from the top 10 seeds. The lowest seeded team they faced was 10th seed Team Ambition, and they still managed to scrape together 3 wins against CLG Faith, AoE Ginger Turmeric, and the aforementioned Team Ambition. Only losses came to 100 Thieves Next and to Maryville, who these players have faced a lot in the collegiate side of things. And that rounds up Group A. Moving on to Group B, which stands for Group Boomer. Not actually, but it does have a ton of very experienced names like Alorim, Ryoma, Prismo, Keel, and Existence here. The first team in it is going to be Jake's Kittens here, 2nd seed in the open qualifiers, and for good reason. This team is stacked. They've got Ryoma, one of the best mid laners, even in Academy here, Scooped, and Prismo. That's right, Scooped and Prismo, both known as AD carry players, but Prismo has role swapped to support here in the PGCQ Summer 2022. The role swap has not slowed him down whatsoever here, as Prismo and Scoop together have been crushing a lot of the bot lanes that they've run up against. They come through open qualifiers 4-1 with their only loss to AoE here, who are the 2nd seeds coming out of the open qualifiers. The second team is an AoE team, but not the AoE main team that beat Jake's Kittens. Instead, it's AoE Ginger Turmeric. And for viewers who follow the spring split, yes, Ginger Turmeric was not an AoE team then, but it is now. And they were considered to be a very, very strong team. They were seeded third into the open qualifiers due to their top 8 finish in the PGCQ Spring number 2. However, with some changes in their mid and AD carry positions, the Ginger Turmerics have not looked quite as strong as they did before going through the open qualifiers 3 and 2 with losses to Team 300 and to the DK crew. Their wins to lower seeded teams like Wild West Bandits, York University, and Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warriors, who didn't quite make the main event. So some questions here to be answered by AoE Ginger Turmerics. Third team in Group B is Team Fish Taco here. And only veterans of the scene would probably recognize this name. After all, they've not been active in the Proving Ground scene, but they were active before that in the amateur scene. And they've got some really historical names as well. You've got Alorum coming back in, who's been a mainstay in the scene for such a long time. Shoryu and Winter both coming in as well. Winter coming back from the EU side of things. So a very strong base to build this team off of here. But they also have some new blood with Limo and Toasty Alex in the jungle and mid lanes respectively here. Some questions around them, but Limo has always been a very good engaged style jungler. The question is, how is his early game? And Toasty Alex, known as a very stable mid laner who doesn't often lose the lane. For Team Fish Taco, though, to have a deep run in the main event, both Limo and Toasty will have to play up to match the veterans on this team. Their open qualifier run, 2 games against Team Ambition, Black and Blaze here. They beat Supernova as well to secure their 3 wins. Their losses were to AoE and EG Prodigy, so really hard to tell where they're going to land right now. For now, they look like an above average team, but might be able to punch even higher than that. And the last team here in Group B is going to be Third Party, a team which qualified in PGCQ Spring number 2 here, but struggled in the main event. A little bit of changes, the most notable one being losing their top laner Zamudo to AoE Esports, but that's been replaced by Dinka here, and Dinka has looked incredibly solid in that top lane. Third Party has not missed a beat so far here. They did have a slightly easier open qualifiers run facing AoE randoms, Team Zeus, Fracture, Ego, and Tempest, with losses to AoE randoms and Fracture, but the win over Tempest Gaming was the big one, their 5th game that got them into the main event, and is notable because they did have to beat a higher seeded team. Moving on to Group C, who has CLG Faith in it. Coincidence? Actually, probably yes. It's also a group full of surprise performances. No, that was bad. In the open qualifiers here. And the first team in it is going to be AoE Esports. Yes, this is the main roster. Big changes. No longer Immortals AoE. The only remaining player is Winston. They rebuilt this entire team from ground up around Winston here, but it's really similar. Strong lanes across the board with more mechanical newer players in the mid and top rows here to enable Winston to play aggressively. And my goodness, has it worked. Going 4-1 in the open qualifiers. Their only loss to 100 Thieves Nyx, and that has been the case with AoE throughout all of 2022 open qualifiers. They only lose to 100 Thieves Nyx, and a lot of this has been enabled by Skytech, their support coming in. The synergy with Winston has been absolutely terrifying. They tear up the rift and they're pushing the tempo at such a pace that very few teams can match them. Second team here in Group C is Team Pending. A bit of a surprise team. A lot of people did not expect them to perform as well as they did, going 4-1 through the open qualifiers, and a lot of that is coming off the age-old synergy between Kitsuo and Robbie Bob in the jungle and mid lane here. With that rock in that mid lane, they've been able to beat out a lot of the other jungle mids they've been dealing with. And their new AD carry, Masu, has been particularly impressive as well on his Senna pick, 3 games of that Senna, and hasn't been punished, able to scale up for free here. Their open qualifiers run had them running up against teams Enigma, RGB, AoE Randoms, and Cincinnati Fear. The wins over AoE Randoms and Cincinnati Fear were extremely notable. They did, however, lose to Maryville University, so Team Pending right now looking like potentially a top 8 team, at least if we just look at the open qualifier results. And of course, third team CLG Faith here, and some might be surprised to see them not top this group necessarily, but it's CLG, and the question with CLG is always, do you have faith? And the same question was asked in the open qualifiers day 1. So CLG Faith go 0-2, facing the risk of elimination right off the bat with losses to Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warriors and DK Crew. But they came back big on day 2 against here for T-Shirt, Wild West Bandits and Team Ambition Blaze to pull off the reverse sweep and confirm their ticket to the main event. It is notable though that they haven't really faced a top 8 or even top 16 team here. The highest seed they faced was Super Sunshine Fruit Basket 25th seed, so a lot of question marks still around CLG Faith. But if you're a CLG fan, would you have it any other way? The last team in Group C here is Team 300, from the man who brought you AoE. He is now the manager for Team 300, and a lot of familiar names on this roster as well. A lot of players who have very, very high potentials, very, very high skill ceilings, but who have struggled in some games here. The most notable point of this team is their bot lane with Minui and Raheen. Yep, that's right, Raheen, who has role swapped to support here for Minui. And Minui has actually opted not to play traditional marksman. 3 games of mages, 1 game of Wukong, and only 1 marksman played in the open qualifier, which is Misfortune. It's looking like a fun team to watch, and hey, whenever you've got Raheen on a team, you can always expect that team to be explosive. Last but definitely not least, we've got Group D, or Group Developmental here, filled with familiar amateur organizations in the proving ground scenes. All 4 teams have opted to bring on new blood this split, and they're already starting to see some payoffs here in the open qualifiers. Topping their group is Evil Genius Prodigies, who went 4-1 in the open qualifiers, only lost to 100 Thieves Nyx here, which is a very, very good start. They've got huge names like Doxa in the mid lane. You've heard of the Doxa diff, well, it's now with Evil Genius's Prodigies. And Faisal being the only returning player from their spring roster. But despite these big names, that's not the biggest draw on this roster. Instead, it's Mia in that bot lane instead. She's made challenger in all 5 roles within the last 3 years, and she chose to go with the AD carry role because she thought that's where her mechanics can best shine. With that much experience and with the versatility in the bot lane currently, she's already pulled out Karthus once in the open qualifiers, and I'm curious to see what else they might be willing to pull out in this bot lane. Second team here in Group D is going to be Taco Gaming, and Taco Gaming, huge roster revamp here with only 1 player returning, Robex, in that support role. They've also got slightly less new players coming in, opting for more experienced players in most roles, except for the mid lane, where Ayakura has come in as their new mid laner here. She's a little bit newer as well, but had a good performance in the spring OQs with Team No Name, and here on Taco Gaming's OQs has performed admirably well. Taco Gaming only dropping 1 game throughout the open qualifiers, and that was to Jake's Kittens. They beat Team Fear and Maryville, 2 big names in the PGC, and so looking good, and a lot of that coming off their jungler City Witty, so definitely a player to watch. Now we're talking development in the amateur scene. You can never count out Supernova, the 3rd team here in Group D. And it's another almost full rebuild with only Ariandel in the mid lane being retained here. And Ariandel, great leader, great facilitator, and so they're building the team around that, with Pluto coming in the support role to help be that mastermind control tower. And with Actor coming into the jungle as well. Actor, massive mechanical monster known to be able to carry on these champions like Olaf, like Kindred as well, which was something Supernova definitely struggled with in the spring split. The open qualifier run for them, rather average. They didn't really face any of the top teams, with their toughest matches being up against Team Fish Taco and 300, and they won the expected games against Ego Geniuses, Team Ambition Black, and UCI. And finally, to round up the developmental group is another developmental team here, The third AoE team, AoE Randoms, and in the past, AoE Randoms has been a big competitor in 2021. Here in 2022, they are rebuilding. Paucus has rejoined AoE Randoms' original PG team as one of the veterans on this team alongside Cyber in the jungle, formerly of Mirage Gaming. They have quite a few newer names, Geiger in the top lane, Nemesis in the mid lane, and Devon in the AD carry role, but they've been stepping up here in the open qualifiers with what can be described as a bit of a volatile run here, with wins over third-party UCI and Team Fracture, but losses to the AoE main team and to Team Pending. A good start here for the AoE Randoms, but they'll need to do more if they want to make playoffs. And, well, that's been Group D, the developmental group here. And with that, the rundown is complete. The open qualifiers are over, but summer is only just starting, and things will only get hotter from here as the group stage and best of threes will be starting this Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific. This has been Random. That's been the rundown, and I'll see you all on the Rift.